Welcome to Wild Human Stories. My name is Lena, and I will be narrating your story today.
Human pilot finds a stowaway fox girl, unaware she stalked him for weeks. The bulkheads of the freighter hummed with a low-frequency vibration that Rhett felt in the marrow of his bones. He adjusted the thrust compensators, his calloused thumbs moving over the toggles with a familiarity that bypassed conscious thought. Every sensor on the console insisted the ship was empty, yet the hair on the back of his neck remained upright. He knew the sounds of his ship like he knew the rhythm of his own pulse, and lately, the ventilation system had been whispering a different tune. There was a weight in the air that didn't belong to the cargo of medical supplies or the recycled oxygen. He leaned back in his pilot's chair, the worn leather creaking under his broad shoulders, and let his eyes drift shut. He wasn't relying on the fancy Xylorian scanners that cost more than his childhood home. Instead, he relied on the primal human sense of being watched, a remnant of a time when his ancestors slept in caves and feared the dark. It was a pressure against his skin, a subtle shift in the cabin's temperature that suggested a body was close by. He didn't reach for his sidearm yet. He simply sat there, letting the silence of deep space stretch between the stars, waiting for the stowaway to make a mistake. Lana pressed her back against the cold interior of the maintenance conduit, her russet fur bristling as she watched the human through the narrow slats of the vent. She had been on this vessel for 22 cycles, surviving on scavenged rations and the thrill of the hunt. Her species, the Vulpine, were masters of stealth, often employed as the galaxy's premier infiltrators because their heartbeats could slow to a mere flutter. She had tracked Rhett from the starport at Altair, drawn to the strange, magnetic aura humans projected, a mixture of chaotic energy and steady determination. He was fascinating to her. Most pilots in this sector were soft, relying on automated systems to navigate the gravitational wells, but Rhett flew as if the ship were an extension of his own nervous system. She watched the way his throat moved when he swallowed, the way his muscles rippled under the thin fabric of his sweat-stained shirt. The heat radiating from him was intoxicating, a sharp contrast to the sterile chill of the vents. She had meant to leave at the first waypoint, but the sight of him, so rugged and unapologetically alive, kept her tethered to the shadows. She shifted her weight, a single claw clicking against the metal floor and her breath hitched in her chest. "I know you're in there," Rhett said. His voice was a gravelly baritone that vibrated through the metal Lana was leaning against. "I've known since we left the last jump gate," Rhett continued. He didn't turn around, but his hands dropped to his thighs, his posture shifting into something coiled and ready. "The air scrubbers are working 5% harder than they should be," Rhett explained. "And my coffee disappeared 2 nights ago," Rhett added. Lana froze, her large, pointed ears twitching as she realized her mistake. The human hadn't used a scanner. He had simply noticed the minute details of his environment. It was a level of situational awareness that her people considered a myth among the lesser species. She hesitated, then realized there was no point in hiding any longer. She pushed the vent cover open with a slow, deliberate movement, the metal grating as it slid out of its tracks. She dropped to the deck plating with the grace of a predator, her long, bushy tail twitching behind her. She stood nearly 6 feet tall, her features a striking blend of vulpine elegance and humanoid curves. Her amber eyes met his in the reflection of the viewport. Rhett turned his chair slowly, his gaze sweeping over her from the tips of her dark-tufted ears to the delicate paws that served as her feet. He didn't look afraid. He looked intensely curious, his eyes darkening with an emotion she couldn't immediately identify. "You're a Vulpine," Rhett noted. "I didn't think your kind took much interest in independent haulers," Rhett said. He stood up, towering over her. The sheer physical presence of the man was overwhelming. He smelled of engine oil and something warm, something deeply masculine that made Lana's instinctual urge to flee war with a newer, hungrier desire to stay. "I am Lana," Lana replied. Her voice was melodic, but carried a sharp edge of defiance. "I was not interested in the hauler human," Lana stated. "I was interested in the pilot," Lana confessed. She took a step forward, her tail sweeping the floor as she challenged his space. Status dynamics among her people were dictated by who blinked first, but Rhett didn't blink. He watched her with a steady, burning intensity that felt like a physical touch against her skin. "You've been watching me for weeks," Rhett whispered. He closed the distance between them until they were inches apart. The heat coming off him was like a furnace. "Why?" Rhett asked. Lana felt her pulse racing, the rapid thrumming against her ribs a betrayal of her supposed Vulpine composure. She reached out, her fingers, tipped with retractable black claws, hesitating before she touched the center of his chest. The fabric of his shirt was thin, and she could feel the powerful beat of his heart underneath. "Humans are an anomaly," Lana whispered. "Your technology is outdated, your bodies are fragile, and yet you navigate the veil as if you own the stars," Lana explained. "I wanted to see the source of that arrogance," Lana said. She looked up at him, her amber eyes wide and searching. Rhett didn't pull away. Instead, he covered her hand with his own, his skin rough and incredibly warm against her fur. "It's not arrogance, Lana," Rhett replied. "It's just the way we're built," Rhett said. He leaned down, his face so close she could feel his breath on her muzzle. The air between them was thick with a tension that had been building in the dark for 20 days. The moment was shattered by a violent shudder that rocked the entire ship. Alarms began to blare, the cockpit lighting flipping to a harsh, strobing red. Rhett was back in his seat before Lana could even regain her balance. "We've got company," Rhett growled. "Vorn raiders," Rhett identified. Lana scrambled to the co-pilot's station, her fingers flying over the console as she tried to make sense of the chaotic data streaming across the screens. "There are 3 of them," Lana reported. "Their targeting locks are already active," Lana added. The Vorn were scavengers, their ships built for speed and brutal boarding actions. They didn't want the cargo. They wanted the ship and anyone on it for the slave markets. Lana felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Her species usually avoided direct confrontation, preferring to slip away before the first shot was fired. "We can't outrun them in this sector," Lana said. "The gravity wells are too unstable," Lana warned. Rhett didn't look worried. He looked focused, a grim smile playing across his lips. "We're not going to outrun them," Rhett said. "We're going to dive," Rhett declared. He gripped the manual flight sticks, bypassing the computer's safety protocols with a series of rapid-fire commands. Lana watched in disbelief as Rhett aimed the freighter directly toward the heart of a nearby gas giant's turbulent atmosphere. "The pressure will crush us," Lana cried. "The hull integrity isn't rated for these depths," Lana argued. "She'll hold," Rhett shouted over the roar of the atmospheric entry. "I reinforced the joints with scrap tungsten 2 months ago," Rhett added. The ship began to scream as the outer plating heated up, the vibration so intense that Lana's vision blurred. The Vorn raiders hesitated, their more sophisticated ships unwilling to follow a primitive vessel into such a suicidal maneuver. Rhett was playing a game of chicken with physics, using his knowledge of the ship's literal breaking point to escape. It was a display of human ingenuity that bordered on madness. He wasn't calculating the odds. He was feeling the strain of the metal and adjusting his thrust to match the turbulence. "Almost there," Rhett grunted. His muscles were strained to the limit as he wrestled with the controls. "Now!" Rhett yelled. He kicked the thrusters into a reverse overdrive, a maneuver that should have ripped the engines from their mounts. Instead, the ship skipped off a dense layer of the atmosphere like a stone across water, slingshotting them away from the Vorn at a velocity the raiders couldn't match. Silence returned to the cabin as they drifted into the quiet vacuum on the other side of the planet. The alarms had faded to a low, rhythmic pulse. Lana slumped in her seat, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She looked at Rhett, who was wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He looked exhausted but exhilarated. "You're insane," Lana stated. "That maneuver should have been impossible," Lana said. "Maybe for a computer," Rhett replied. "But a computer doesn't know how much a human can endure," Rhett added. He turned to her, the adrenaline still clearly coursing through his veins. The danger had stripped away the last of their barriers. He reached out, his hand grasping the back of her neck, pulling her toward him. Lana didn't resist. She met him halfway, her lips crashing against his in a desperate, hungry kiss. He tasted of copper and salt, his tongue sliding against hers with a raw possessiveness that sent a jolt of electricity through her entire body. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her claws digging slightly into his shoulders as she pulled him closer, needing to feel the solidity of him against her. Rhett stood up, lifting her effortlessly from her seat. He didn't break the kiss as he carried her toward the back of the cockpit, where a small bunk was recessed into the bulkhead. He set her down on the thin mattress, his body following hers, pinning her against the wall. His hands were everywhere, exploring the soft texture of her fur and the firm muscle underneath. Lana arched her back, a low purr vibrating in her throat as he buried his face in the crook of her neck, his teeth grazing her skin. "You've been watching me," Rhett whispered against her ear. "Now it's my turn," Rhett said. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands moving to the fastenings of her tactical suit. "Show me everything, Lana," Rhett commanded. She reached for the hem of his shirt, pulling it over his head and tossing it aside. His chest was broad, covered in a light dusting of dark hair that felt incredible against her palms. She traced the lines of his abdominal muscles, her breath hitching as he pressed his lower body against hers. The intensity of the moment was overwhelming, a collision of two species that should have had nothing in common, but were now fused together by a shared fire. The intimacy was a revelation. Lana had known physical pleasure before, but it had always been a calculated biological function of her species. With Rhett, it was an assault on her senses. He was dominant without being cruel, his movements guided by a deep, intuitive understanding of what she needed. He touched her as if she were the most precious cargo he had ever carried, his fingers finding the sensitive spots behind her ears and along the base of her tail. She felt herself unraveling, her Vulpine composure melting away into a series of soft whimpers and sharp gasps. When he finally entered her, the sensation was a pure, white-hot explosion that made her world go dark. She clung to him, her legs wrapping around his waist, as they moved together in the cramped space of the bunk. The ship drifted through the void, a tiny speck of heat and life in the vast, cold expanse of the galaxy, and for that moment, there was nothing else in existence but the two of them. Hours later, Lana lay with her head on Rhett's chest, watching the stars drift past the viewport. The silence between them was comfortable now, the tension replaced by a deep, quiet connection. She traced the scars on his arms, wondering about the stories behind each one. "You can't go back to the Vulpine," Rhett said. His voice was soft, but he wasn't asking a question. "I know," Lana replied. "I was sent to evaluate the human presence in this sector," Lana admitted. "If I tell them what I've seen, what I've felt, they will see you as a threat," Lana explained. "And if I don't go back, they will mark me as a traitor," Lana added. Rhett shifted, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "Then stay," Rhett said. "The Veil is a big place, and this ship could use a better navigator," Rhett suggested. "And a better thief," Rhett added with a smirk. Lana looked up at him, her amber eyes reflecting the distant nebulae. "I am not a thief, human," Lana corrected. "I am an explorer," Lana said. "And I think I've found exactly what I was looking for," Lana finished. The peace was short-lived. A proximity alert chimed on the console, more insistent than the last. Lana sat up, her ears swiveling toward the cockpit. "It's not the Vorn," Lana said, her voice dropping an octave. "It's a Vulpine scout ship," Lana identified. Rhett was on his feet in an instant, pulling his trousers on and reaching for his boots. "They tracked your signature," Rhett surmised. "They want their operative back," Rhett said. Lana stood, her naked body bathed in the pale light of the stars. She felt a momentary pang of fear, not for herself, but for Rhett. Her people didn't use brute force like the Vorn, they used precision and psychological warfare. They would dismantle Rhett's ship piece by piece until he was forced to surrender her. "You have to let me go," Lana whispered. "They won't stop until they have me," Lana warned. Rhett stopped and looked at her, his expression unreadable. He walked over to her and took her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "I don't surrender what's mine, Lana," Rhett said. "And you're mine," Rhett declared. He led her back to the console, but instead of preparing for a fight, he began to pull up the ship's internal schematics. "We're going to use your tech in my ship," Rhett said. "Can you interface your scout's encryption key with my comms array?" Rhett asked. Lana nodded, understanding his plan instantly. He wanted to broadcast a false signal, a phantom ghost of the ship that would lead the Vulpine scouts on a wild chase through the asteroid belt while they slipped away in the opposite direction. It was a classic human shell game, elevated by the addition of alien technology. "I can do it," Lana confirmed, "but it will burn out your comms array," Lana cautioned. "I'll fix it," Rhett replied. "I've got plenty of spare wire and a lot of time," Rhett said. They worked in a frantic, synchronized rhythm, their bodies moving around each other in the small space with an ease that felt as if they had been partners for years. Lana felt a surge of pride as she watched Rhett adapt his primitive systems to accept her high-frequency commands. He didn't just understand the tech, he commanded it. The broadcast went live just as the Vulpine scout ship entered visual range. On the sensors, the freighter appeared to split into 3 identical signatures, each heading toward a different cluster of asteroids. The Vulpine, confused by the sudden surge of familiar encryption, hesitated. It was all the time Rhett needed. He cut all power to the main engines, letting the ship drift on its current momentum, hidden by the thermal shadow of a nearby moon. They watched on the long-range scanners as the Vulpine scouts accelerated toward the false signals, disappearing into the jagged debris of the belt. "It worked," Lana breathed. "They're gone," Lana said. Rhett leaned against the console, a slow grin spreading across his face. "I told you," Rhett said. "Humans are harder to catch than we look," Rhett added. He turned to her, his eyes warm. "Now about that navigator position," Rhett started. Lana laughed, a bright, melodic sound that filled the cabin. She walked over to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and burying her face in his chest. "The pay is terrible," Lana noted, "and the food is questionable," Lana added. "But the benefits," Rhett whispered. He lifted her chin, his gaze locked on hers. "The benefits are out of this world," Rhett said. He kissed her then, a long, slow promise of everything that was to come. They were 2 fugitives in a galaxy that didn't understand them, but as Rhett looked out at the infinite horizon, he knew they had everything they needed. Humanity's greatest trick wasn't just surviving, it was finding something worth living for in the middle of the dark. He reached out and engaged the sublight engines, steering the ship toward the far edge of the sector, where the stars were still unnamed and the possibilities were endless. Lana stood beside him, her hand in his, ready to see what else the human could do. The ship moved into the deep black, leaving the settled systems behind. Rhett checked the fuel levels, nodding that they had enough for a long haul if they were careful. He looked at Lana, who was now intently studying the star charts, her tail twitching in thought. She had already begun to optimize the ship's route, finding shortcuts through the nebula that his computer had completely ignored. "You're already making me look bad," Rhett joked. "I am simply improving your efficiency, Rhett," Lana replied. She looked over her shoulder, a mischievous glint in her amber eyes. "Your species has a saying about work smarter, not harder," Lana reminded him. "I'm just helping you live up to it," Lana said. Rhett chuckled, pulling her back into his arms for a moment. "I think we're going to get along just fine," Rhett said. He looked ahead at the vast, shimmering expanse of the veil, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. They were a human and a Vulpine, an impossible pair in an unforgiving universe. But as the ship accelerated into the unknown, Rhett knew that as long as they were together, the galaxy would always be theirs to conquer.